"Mom, I'd like you to meet Vanessa, the woman I'm going to marry." My son David beamed with pride as he introduced his fiancée in our living room. The elegant blonde extended her hand with a polite smile, but when our eyes met, a flash of recognition crossed her face before she quickly composed herself. My world stopped. Standing before me, 20 years older but unmistakable, was the same woman who had destroyed my marriage and torn apart our family when David was just 9 years old. Has life ever thrown you a cruel twist like this? Have you ever had to face someone from your past who caused you deep pain? Share your experience in the comments below. I'd love to know which city you're listening from and if you've faced a similar situation. If this story resonates with you, please support me with a super thanks so I can continue sharing these life experiences. My name is Catherine Harmon. I'm 62 years old, and until that moment when my son brought home his fiancée, I thought I had finally put my painful past behind me. 20 years ago, my husband James and I had what I believed was a happy marriage. We had built a comfortable life together with our 2 children, David, 9, and his younger sister Lisa, 7. James worked as a marketing executive at a large firm, while I had scaled back my career as a nurse to part-time hours to be more present for our children. The first signs that something was wrong came when James began working increasingly late hours. He became distant, irritable, and secretive about his phone. I told myself it was just work stress, even as the knot of worry in my stomach grew tighter each day. When I found receipts for dinners and hotel stays I knew nothing about, James dismissed them as business expenses. "You're being paranoid, Catherine," he would say with an exasperated sigh. "Not everything is your business. I'm working hard to provide for this family." Then came that fateful afternoon when I picked up our daughter early from a playdate because she wasn't feeling well. As we drove past an upscale restaurant downtown, I spotted James's car in the parking lot. It was 2 p.m. on a Wednesday, nowhere near dinner time, and certainly not during a typical business meeting hour. Something made me pull over. "Wait here, honey," I told Lisa, leaving the car running with the air conditioning on. "Mommy needs to check something quickly." Through the restaurant's large windows, I saw them immediately. James was sitting at a corner table with a young blonde woman. They weren't discussing business papers or laptops. They were holding hands across the table, gazing at each other with undisguised affection. As I watched, frozen in place, James leaned across and kissed her. The confrontation that evening after the children went to bed was brief and devastating. "Her name is Vanessa," James admitted without much remorse once he realized I had seen them. "She's the new marketing director. And yes, we've been seeing each other for 6 months." "6 months?" I echoed, my voice barely a whisper. "All those late nights." "Catherine, I didn't plan for this to happen, but Vanessa understands me in ways you never have. She's ambitious, exciting. We connect intellectually in ways that you and I don't anymore." "What about our children? Our family?" I asked, tears streaming down my face. James looked away. "I'll always be their father. But I need to be happy too. I can't keep living this life just because it's what's expected of me." Within 2 weeks, James had moved out of our family home and into a downtown apartment. 3 months later, he filed for divorce. The settlement was reasonably fair financially. He didn't try to cheat me out of my share of our assets, but the emotional devastation was immeasurable. Worst of all was watching our confused children try to understand why their father had left. "But doesn't Daddy love us anymore?" Lisa had asked repeatedly, her small face crumpled with hurt. "Of course he does, sweetheart," I assured her, though I wondered myself how someone could so easily walk away from the family he had helped create. James began a new life with Vanessa. They traveled to exotic locations, attended glamorous events, and projected the image of a perfect power couple on social media. Meanwhile, I picked up extra nursing shifts to make ends meet, helped the children with homework, and cried myself to sleep in an empty bed. The children visited James every other weekend, returning with stories of fancy restaurants and the cool apartment Daddy shared with his friend Vanessa. I bit my tongue, determined not to poison their relationship with their father despite my own pain. After about a year, James and Vanessa moved to Chicago for a major career opportunity. The distance meant the children saw their father only during school breaks and holidays. Gradually, the visits became less frequent as James built his new life, one that increasingly had less space for his first family. I focused on rebuilding our lives. I returned to nursing full-time, eventually working my way up to a management position at the hospital. I bought a smaller but cozy home in a good school district. I made sure David and Lisa had as normal a childhood as possible, attending their soccer games and dance recitals, helping with science projects, and creating new family traditions. Dating wasn't a priority. My trust had been too deeply broken, and my children needed stability. There were a few relationships over the years, but nothing that stuck. Instead, I built a rich life filled with close friendships, community involvement, and pride in watching my children grow into capable young adults. When David left for college, he chose Northwestern in Chicago, where James and Vanessa were still living. I worried about the influence his father might have, but I knew I had to let him make his own choices. During those years, I gathered from occasional comments that David did see his father, though not as frequently as I had feared. James and Vanessa had never had children of their own, and from what David shared, they led busy, work-focused lives that didn't revolve around family. Lisa chose a university closer to home and stayed more connected to me. She rarely mentioned her father, and when she did, it was with a detachment that suggested she had processed his abandonment in her own way. After graduation, David took a job at a tech company in Seattle. During his occasional visits home, he mentioned dating various women, but nothing serious. Then, 6 months ago, he called with excitement in his voice. "Mom, I've met someone amazing. Her name is Vanessa, and I think she might be the one." My heart skipped a beat at the name, but I quickly dismissed the thought. Vanessa was a common name. It had to be a coincidence. "That's wonderful, honey," I said sincerely. "Tell me about her." "She's a bit older than me, actually. She's 39, he said with a slight hesitation. "But she's brilliant, Mom. She works in marketing, she's well-traveled, and she gets me in a way no one else ever has." The parallels made me uncomfortable, but I reminded myself that David was a grown man making his own choices. Many young men are attracted to slightly older, established women. It didn't mean anything. "I can't wait for you to meet her," David continued. "We're going to visit next month, if that works for you." And so, on a sunny Saturday afternoon, my 30-year-old son brought home his fiancée, the very same woman who had seduced my husband away from our family 2 decades earlier. The moments after that initial recognition were a blur. Somehow, I managed to shake Vanessa's hand, to offer refreshments, to make small talk, while my mind raced and my heart pounded so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. David was oblivious, proudly sharing how they had met at a marketing conference in Seattle where Vanessa was the keynote speaker. He explained that she had moved to Seattle 3 years ago after a career change and wanting a fresh start. I watched Vanessa carefully as she sat on my couch, the very couch I had purchased after James took our original furniture for his new life with her. She was poised, elegant, and visibly uncomfortable. Her eyes avoided mine whenever possible, and her smiles seemed forced. She knew exactly who I was, and she was waiting to see what I would do. "So, Vanessa," I said during a lull in conversation, "David mentioned you were in Chicago before Seattle. What took you there originally?" Her eyes flickered briefly to mine before she looked away. "A job opportunity in marketing. I was there for quite some time." "About 15 years, right?" I pressed, watching her carefully. She nodded, taking a sip of her water. "Yes, roughly that. It was a good run, but I was ready for something new." "And before Chicago?" I continued, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. David interjected. "Mom, why the interrogation? You sound like you're interviewing her for a job." "I'm just getting to know the woman my son wants to marry," I replied, not taking my eyes off Vanessa. "It's natural to be curious about her background." Vanessa set down her glass with a controlled movement. "It's fine, David. Before Chicago, I was actually in this area, working for Meridian Marketing. The same company where James had worked. The same company where their affair had begun." "What a coincidence," I said, my voice dripping with significance only Vanessa would understand. A tense silence fell over the room. David looked between us, sensing something was off but unable to identify what. "Mom, is everything okay?" he asked. I excused myself to the kitchen, claiming I needed to check on dinner. As soon as I was alone, I gripped the counter, trying to steady my breathing. How was this possible? Of all the women in the world, how had my son chosen the very one who had destroyed our family? More importantly, what was I going to do about it? I could expose her immediately, tell David exactly who she was and what she had done. I could watch her perfectly constructed facade crumble as the truth came out. The temptation was overwhelming. But as I stood there, I thought about David, about how happy he had sounded on the phone, how he had been glowing with pride as he introduced her. Would destroying his happiness serve any purpose other than revenge, and was revenge worth the pain it would cause my son? I took a deep breath and returned to the living room with a forced smile. For the remainder of the evening, I maintained a cordial facade, asking about their wedding plans, listening as they talked about their life in Seattle, watching my son's face light up whenever he looked at her. After dinner, David offered to go pick up dessert from the bakery down the street, leaving Vanessa and me alone. The moment the door closed behind him, the atmosphere shifted. "You didn't tell him," she said quietly, a question in her voice. "No," I replied, clearing the dishes. "Not yet." Vanessa stood and followed me to the kitchen. "Catherine, I know this is unimaginable for you. Believe me, when David first told me his mother's name, I thought it had to be a different Catherine Harmon." I turned to face her. "But it wasn't. And yet you continued the relationship. You got engaged to him, knowing exactly who he was." She looked down. "By then, I was already in love with him. He's nothing like James, you know. He's kind and thoughtful in ways James never was." "Don't you dare compare them," I snapped, my composure finally cracking. "You don't get to talk about my son like you understand him. You stole his father from him when he was 9 years old." "I know," she whispered, and to my surprise, I saw tears in her eyes. "I know what we did was unforgivable. I was 25 and ambitious and selfish. I thought James represented everything I wanted: success, sophistication. I told myself that if he really loved his family, he wouldn't have been so easily led away." "Is that how you justified it?" I asked bitterly. "By blaming us?" "I'm not proud of who I was then," she continued. "James and it fell apart after about 12 years. He had an affair with his assistant. Ironic, isn't it?" I found myself on the other side of the betrayal. It made me see things differently. I felt no satisfaction at hearing about James's infidelity to her. The cycle of pain had simply continued. "And now you're with my son," I said. "Do you see why I might find that disturbing? Why I might question your motives?" "I understand why you would," she admitted, "but I didn't know who David was when we met. By the time I realized, we were already serious. I should have ended it then, I know that. But I couldn't bring myself to walk away from the first truly good relationship I've ever had." I studied her face, looking for signs of the manipulative homewrecker I had imagined for 20 years. Instead, I saw a middle-aged woman with lines of experience around her eyes, showing vulnerability and what appeared to be genuine regret. "Does he know about your relationship with his father?" I asked. She shook her head. "James and I agreed to a clean break when we split. He moved to New York, and I stayed in Chicago until my move to Seattle. David never mentioned reconnecting with his father as an adult, so I don't think they've been in touch for years." That matched what I knew. After Lisa's high school graduation, which James had missed for a business trip, the children had gradually stopped trying to maintain a relationship with him. Last I had heard, James was on his third marriage to a woman nearly as young as Vanessa had been when he left me. "What are you going to do?" Vanessa asked finally. It was the question I had been wrestling with since the moment I recognized her. What was the right thing to do? What would cause the least harm? "I don't know yet," I answered honestly, "but I do know that if you hurt my son the way you hurt our family, there will be no place far enough for you to hide from me." She nodded, accepting the threat. "I won't hurt him. I love him in a way I never loved James, a real way, not based on fantasy or ambition. I know you have no reason to believe me, but it's the truth." We heard David's key in the lock, and our conversation ended abruptly. We moved back to the living room, resuming our roles as if nothing had happened. That night, after they left for their hotel, I sat up for hours wrestling with my decision. The mother in me wanted to protect David from potential heartbreak, to warn him about the woman he was planning to marry. But the wiser part of me recognized that he was an adult who had chosen this relationship, and that Vanessa, despite our history, might genuinely have changed over 20 years. In the morning, I asked David to come over alone for coffee. When he arrived, I could tell he sensed something serious was coming. "You didn't seem yourself last night, Mom," he said as we sat at the kitchen table. "Is everything okay?" I took a deep breath. "David, there's something I need to tell you about Vanessa." His face immediately tensed. "What about her?" "I know her," I said carefully. From many years ago. David's brow furrowed. How? You seemed like strangers yesterday. She was the woman your father left us for 20 years ago. The color drained from his face. For several long moments he sat perfectly still, processing my words. That's not possible, he finally said. Dad moved to Chicago with a woman named Vanessa. I finished for him. Vanessa Brennan. She was the marketing director at Meridian. David stood up abruptly, pacing the kitchen. She would have told me. She knows I'm James Harmon's son. She would have said something. Would she? Think about it, David. Would she have risked losing you by admitting that connection? He ran his hands through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of his father that it made my heart ache. I need to talk to her. I need to hear her side. Of course you do, I said gently, but I wanted you to hear it from me first. He turned to me, his expression a mix of confusion and betrayal. Why didn't you say something last night? Why did you sit through dinner like everything was normal? Because I needed time to think, I explained. I needed to decide what was the right thing to do. You seemed so happy with her, and I didn't want to ruin that without being certain. Certain of what? That telling you was the right choice, that I wasn't just acting out of old hurt and resentment. David was silent for a long moment. And what made you decide to tell me? You deserve to know the truth. Whatever you decide to do with it is up to you, but I couldn't let you marry her without knowing who she was to our family. He nodded slowly, then grabbed his keys. I need to go. I need to talk to Vanessa. I watched him leave, uncertain if I had done the right thing or if I had just destroyed my relationship with my son. Had I acted out of maternal protection or selfish revenge? The line seemed too blurry to distinguish. 3 days passed with no word from David. I called and texted but received no response. I began to fear that he had chosen Vanessa's version of events over mine, that I had lost him just as I had lost his father. On the 4th day, as I was returning from work, I found David sitting on my porch steps. His eyes were red-rimmed, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion. David, I said, relief flooding through me. I've been so worried. Can we talk? He asked, his voice hoarse. Inside, I made us both tea, waiting patiently as he gathered his thoughts. I confronted Vanessa, he finally said. She admitted everything. She knew exactly who I was from the beginning. I felt a cold anger at this revelation. Despite her tears in my kitchen, she had lied about when she had recognized the connection. She said she fell in love with me before she realized I was James's son, but that's not true. David continued. She sought me out at that conference deliberately. She had seen my name and company on the attendee list and made a point to meet me. Why? I asked, struggling to understand. After all these years, why would she do that? David looked up, his eyes filled with pain. Apparently, when Dad left her for his assistant, he told her she was getting too old for him, that he needed someone with fresh energy. It destroyed her self-image. When she saw my name, a younger Harmon in the same industry, she thought. He couldn't finish. She thought seducing the son would validate what she'd lost with the father. I finished for him, understanding the twisted psychology. He nodded miserably. She claims she developed real feelings for me over time, that what started as something sick became genuine. Maybe that's even true. But I can't get past the deception, the manipulation. Every moment of our relationship feels tainted now. I reached across the table and took his hand. I'm so sorry, David. I wish you never had to know any of this. He squeezed my hand. No, Mom, I'm glad you told me. I had a right to know. And I'm sorry for not responding to your messages. I needed time to process everything. Of course you did, I assured him. I understand. I broke things off with her, he said after a pause. I gave back the ring and booked her a flight back to Seattle. It's over. I felt an immense relief, followed immediately by guilt for feeling relieved at my son's heartbreak. Are you okay? No, he admitted with a sad smile. But I will be. I just keep thinking about how differently things might have gone if you hadn't recognized her. I might have married her, never knowing the truth. We talked for hours that evening, more openly than we had in years. David shared how disconnected he had felt from his father growing up, how he had tried to reconnect during college but found James distant and uninterested. He admitted that he had been attracted to Vanessa partly because of her confidence and sophistication qualities he had observed and admired in the glimpses he had of his father's new life as a child. I think I was trying to understand him, David confessed. By being with someone like Vanessa, maybe I thought I could figure out why he chose that life over us. The insight broke my heart. All these years, while I had been focusing on rebuilding our lives, my son had been carrying wounds I hadn't fully recognized. Over the following weeks, David stayed in town, taking remote work from my house while he processed his grief and betrayal. We had more honest conversations about the past, about James, about the impact his abandonment had had on all of us. It was painful but healing, like lancing an infection that had been festering for 20 years. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, David asked a question that caught me off guard. "Mom, why didn't you ever remarry? Or at least have a serious relationship? Was it because of what Dad did?" I considered my answer carefully. Partly, yes. Trust doesn't come easily after betrayal like that, but it was also about priorities. You and Lisa needed stability, not a parade of men coming and going from our lives, and once you were both grown, I had built a life I was content with. I had my career, my friends, my community involvement. But weren't you lonely? Sometimes, I admitted, but loneliness isn't the worst thing in the world. Making poor choices out of fear of being alone, that's far worse. He nodded thoughtfully. I think I understand that now. 2 months later, David returned to Seattle, stronger and more self-aware than before. He had decided to stay at his job but was considering a transfer to the company's Denver office for a fresh start. Lisa, who now lived in Boston with her husband and young daughter, had been supportive throughout, flying out for a weekend to comfort her brother. As for me, this unexpected family crisis had brought an unexpected gift, a closer relationship with my son, and a sense of closure I hadn't realized I still needed. The ghost of James's betrayal, which had quietly haunted our family for 2 decades, had finally been exorcised. Last week, I received a text from David with a photo attached. It showed him standing on a mountain trail, grinning broadly beside a woman about his age, with curly brown hair and hiking boots. "Mom, this is Michelle. We met in my rock climbing class, taking things slow but wanted you to see who's making me smile these days." I studied the woman's open, friendly face and felt a profound sense of relief. My son was healing, moving forward, making healthier choices. Later that day, while cleaning out some old files, I came across my wedding photo with James. We looked so young, so certain that our love would last forever. I no longer felt the pang of hurt that had accompanied that image for so many years. Instead, I felt a calm acceptance of the journey my life had taken. My son had brought home his fiancée, and I had recognized her as the woman my husband had left me for 20 years earlier. It was a cruel twist of fate that had reopened old wounds, but in doing so, it had also allowed for deeper healing. Sometimes the most painful collisions with our past are necessary for us to truly move forward. Life rarely gives us neat, satisfying conclusions to our painful chapters. Instead, it offers us chances to write new chapters, to revise our understanding of old ones, and to recognize that our stories continue beyond the moments that once defined us. My story didn't end when James walked out the door with Vanessa, and it won't end with this unexpected reunion. It continues to unfold, page by page, as I choose how to respond to whatever comes next. If you enjoyed my story, please don't forget to like, subscribe to my channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss my new life stories. Your support means everything to me and helps me continue sharing these real experiences. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next video.